As Court mentioned, the Ocean Exchange wouldn't be the same, our industry wouldn't be the same without some of the sponsors and some of the corporate partners that we have with our businesses as well as with the Ocean Exchange. So to tell us a little bit more about Gulfstream is Joe Lombardo. Joe is the Executive Vice President for the Aerospace Group for the General Dynamics Corporation, and also served as Gulfstream President from 2007 to 2011. Gulfstream obviously is also a worldwide sponsor, and that's worth saying as many times as we can fit it in. After starting his aerospace career in 1975 at Douglas Aircraft, Joe held leadership responsibility roles for production and material control, planning, and manufacturing. Before joining Gulfstream, Lombardo was general manager of production for twin jets at the Douglas Aircraft Company, which is a division of McDonnell Douglas Corporation. He was responsible for the successful ramp-up and dual production of both the Gulfstream 4 and 5, and as chief operating officer, he was responsible for the cost, quality, and schedule of Gulfstream's manufactured products. So to tell us a little bit more, please help me welcome Joe Lombardo.
Well, good morning and welcome. You're probably wondering why a guy that's been involved with airplanes for 38 years, airplanes that fly between 30 and 50,000 feet and burn a lot of fuel and a lot of carbon, what the heck is he doing up here talking about Ocean Exchange? And so hopefully I'll be able to answer some of those questions, because they were questions that I had to deal with when first approached almost 4 years ago by the founders of Ocean Exchange, and trying to set in my own mind why we would want to be involved in this. And really there were three things that became evident early on, and some of this was based on a belief and a little bit of a bet about what could happen with Ocean Exchange over the years. It had to be sustainable, and that was a key question we had. So anyway, three reasons became apparent a little bit later on. One was that Gulfstream is the largest employer in Savannah, Georgia. That's where it's based. And so we've always felt we have a corporate responsibility, a community responsibility for the areas which we reside. And we also have a brand that's recognized globally around the world. Second, what Court and the other founders described to me was a vision where a diverse group of board of governors would be rounded up and who would help develop and grow a global innovation solution exchange that over time would bring industry, scientists, environmentalists, and a whole group of thinkers together who could understand the fine balance that we have that exists between commerce and the environment. And third, and consistent with the idea of global solutions exchange, was to find a means to develop a process that would reach out to innovators and solution providers around the world. And I strongly believe now, in our third year, that we're doing just that. Around the same time, coincidentally, Gulfstream was trying to develop its own sustainability goals, a strategy that would be something that we could develop and mature over the years, that focused on emissions and noise reduction, facility improvements, and aircraft design and manufacturing. And it's a strategy that I'm going to share with you this morning so you can get a better idea why this is so important to us. So for us, being part of this global forum that allows for the introduction, support, and celebration of a lot of very good ideas has been very important to us. So if I could, let me get into the presentation. All right, a little bit about Gulfstream Corporation. It is considered a leading manufacturer in the world's most advanced airplanes in the world. It meets the needs of a lot of different clients, very diverse clientele, from private individuals to private corporations, people who have been traveling and using our airplanes for over 50 years. The customers are primarily corporations, but both public and private, but we also have other organizations that have been buying our airplanes. Just try to imagine that about 80% of the aircraft that we built and delivered over the last 50 years or so primarily were delivered in North America. And over the last 4 or 5 years, that mix has changed dramatically, where many of our airplanes that we build are now delivered internationally. Matter of fact, over 50% of them. We focus solely on unique aspects of business aviation, the opportunity for customers and to be able to do many things to satisfy many of their needs. And this really sets the standard for which we design airplanes. And that's travel flexibility, reduced travel time, improved passenger productivity, and enhanced safety and security, to name just a few. All right, we're part of General Dynamics, as was mentioned just a few minutes ago. General Dynamics purchased Gulfstream back in 1999. We're part of 4 groups. The 3 groups you see above are primarily defense companies. And Gulfstream and Aerospace, for example, that is made up of 2 companies. One is Gulfstream, the other one is Jet Aviation, are almost exclusively commercial. And we make up about $6.9 billion of the revenues of the corporation, but exceedingly more of the operating earnings. We have facilities all over the world. We really concentrate on 2 principal missions with our facilities. One is manufacturing. You can see the sites mentioned below, and then product support. You can imagine that when we're delivering all these airplanes, we have over 2,200 aircraft in the installed fleet around the world. And our obligation is to make sure we can service them. It's one thing to deliver an airplane. It's another thing to make sure that they're maintained, and we take care of the clients. And that's our principal focus. Georgia is the primary facility. It's corporate headquarters for Gulfstream. There's about 8,500 employees that reside in Georgia. We have a few in Brunswick, Georgia. One thing I do want to say is that when we have committed ourselves to a long-term strategic plan here at Gulfstream in Savannah, what that's done is created a lot of jobs. Over 1,400 jobs so far this year alone. And we're going to continue to do that because we're building in this community, and we're giving back as well, and we're getting a lot from the community. This is the product line and the evolution, starting from the G1. The G1 was built in Bethpage, New York, and then a decision was made by Grumman Aircraft to start producing these business aircraft in Savannah, Georgia, and that started in 1967 with the G2, and you can see how as it evolved. The G4 in 1987 and the G5 in 1997. Now, those airplanes have since had derivatives, the 450 and the 550 that I'll show you in just a moment. And you can see it right here, that product line has changed fairly significantly. We not only build large cabin aircraft, with our partnership with IAI, which is an Israeli company, we went into the mid-cabin market in 2001, and that's the 150 and the 280 you see above. And then you can see the large cabin aircraft that follow. One thing to mention is that each one of these aircraft have different missions. The 650 entered into service last year, the latter part of last year. It is their ultra-long-range aircraft. It can fly 7,000 nautical miles at 8.5 and 6,000 nautical miles at 9.0. And this is very important because one thing our customers tell us is they want to be able to go far, and they want to do it faster, and they want to do it safely. This is a range map, and it just gives you a sense of what these products do. And again, I mentioned the fact that speed and range are very important. As we become more of an international company, we're selling to clientele that fly all over the world. So what do they want? They want to get there as fast as they can. They want to get there safely and as quickly as they can and as far as they can. So this is kind of a look at from the smaller airplane, the 150, all the way to the 650, and you can see the range capabilities at different speeds that each one of these airplanes have. And so when we go out and sell an airplane, this is one of the charts we show them so they get an idea of what they can do, what kind of city pairs they can meet as a result of buying our products. Now, we belong to a very, very diverse industry of manufacturers that make airplanes around the world. And a few years ago, General Aviation Manufacturing Association began to formulate a set of goals that would address aviation industry emissions. You know, I'll tell you, when we first started looking at this, we didn't get defensive, but we weren't really sure whether or not we needed to be aggressive in this area. And the reason is we looked at a couple of statistics. General aviation is about 2% of all the aviation emissions, CO2 emissions, and about 0.04% of all carbon emissions. So it's easy to get caught up in the argument that we're not really much of a polluter, so why even worry about it? Well, a couple things I'd mention. First of all, we still were polluting the environment and are today. And secondly, more and more airplanes are being delivered to the international marketplace, so the installed fleet of general aviation aircraft is increasing dramatically. So we're going to have much more of an impact on the environment. So what did we do? We set a broad set of emission goals that are here. And these goals outline specific targets for the reduction of CO2 emissions primarily. That's to carbon neutral by 2020, achieve fuel efficiencies of 1.5%, 2% annually through 2020, and then by 2050 to be able to reduce CO2 emissions by 50%, and that's the baseline is 2005. So we've made a commitment based on 4 pillars, and you can see them also in the graph. One is improved technology, for example, avionics, the ability to be able to approach airports without having to circle the airports. Many of you that fly on commercial airplanes, on airliners, you'll know that sometimes you're slowed down. You end up cycling an airport sometimes. That's because of the efficiency of the air traffic control system, and avionics and the air traffic control system is very important that we do that. Infrastructure and operations is also critical. That's satellite-based navigation, and what you'll hear about FAA modernization, because that's a very, very fundamental need for us with the FAA to be able to modernize their technology. And then the use of alternative fuels. You know, and although very promising, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, it's going to require some sustaining funding and a commitment by the industry to make sure that we can do this. Because as you'll note in the graphic, it's about 40% of the goal to be able to reach the 50% reduction goal by 2050. And then market-based measures, and these are usually measures such as working with the EU on trading scheme emission controls and so forth. So if you look at the graphic, you'll note that biofuels, along with other evolving technology solutions, would contribute the most to these reduction goals. So, specific to Gulfstream, there are a number of sustainability efforts that I just wanted to mention. We have a long history of product improvement, and noise, emissions, fuel burn, and it's all about having a focus on the environment. So sustainability is being introduced to all aspects of our business, including aircraft design and manufacturing. And our enterprise-wide sustainability goals deal with things like facility improvements, aircraft design and manufacturing, supply chain, the use of renewable fuels, and then an internal focus with our teams in trying to do things every day that help reduce our impact to the environment. Let me start with noise. The federal aviation regulations, what they call FARs, have come up with a standard that's in Part 36, and aircraft with certain type certificates received after 2006 and beyond must meet what are referred to as Stage 4 standards. Stage 3 was set back in 2005 for existing in-production aircraft, and for our purposes, the Stage 4 limit is designated in the horizontal line. That's that red line you see in this graphic, and our goal is to be well below that, and we are. So by the way, if you look at that red line and you look at the aircraft that are currently in production, now the 4 and the 5 are now replaced by the 450 and the 550, and the 650, of course, is brand new. And you see we're doing pretty good in the terms of noise reduction. Now, the other is in emissions, and this gets pretty complicated, but also very challenging for us. The International Civil Aviation Organization, which some of you have heard of, ICAO, was found back in 1944 with a specific objective of promoting aviation safety, security, and efficiency, to name just a few of the things in the categories that they're involved with. ICAO's current environmental activities are handled through a group called the Committee on Aviation Environmental Protection, or CAPE. CAPE was established back in 1983. This group meets annually and sets standards for emissions every 3 years. And our industry is now moving to meet the CAPE 6 standards specific to engines and engines that are put on our airframes. So older aircraft like the G2, et cetera, those are under different standards, but the G450, the 550, and the 650 have especially demonstrated a progressive reduction in nitrous oxide levels over the years, and you can see them here. Now, those designations underneath those bars are the engine types that go on our airplanes. If you look at fuel efficiency, I mentioned earlier that improving fuel efficiency is part of our environmental and industrial technology goal, which will help us meet those CO2 emissions goals of 50% by 2050. We measure fuel efficiency by what's referred to as block emission, which is 3,000 nautical mile emissions, and that's how we set the standard. That's how we measure how we're doing. And as you can see here, there have been some steady improvements from one Gulfstream model to the next, and you can see the 650 has made a 10% improvement from the 550, and the 550 20% over the 450. So we have really done a lot in this area, and we've got more to do. We're not done yet. As far as CO2 emissions go, and our goals to make them more efficient, We translate CO2 emissions and measure them based on metric tons. And you can see the graphic here. And it's just important to note that those same types of improvements have been made model by model, and we're going to continue to do that as we introduce new models into the industry and into the environment later. Now, a little bit about renewable fuels and why we're so interested in this. What are renewable fuels in the first place? Many of you, I'm sure, know this, but they're involves the recovery of any biological source used for fuels. In other words, once that source is harvested, how do we make sure that it's recovered quickly? And so some of the fuels we're looking at have to be able to meet that sustainability goal. And quite frankly, when we look at these, they represent a step change in reducing emissions, less sulfur, aromatics, carcinogens, and fine particles especially, and can be less CO2 in terms of what they do in their life cycle. So renewable fuels do two things that support our goals. They support sustainability, and they support the industry-wide goal of CO2 emissions reductions over time. We also believe that that renewable fuels will be recognized by the European Union Emissions Trading Scheme. And what we want to do is make sure that we use these and we understand the dynamics and the challenges associated with make sure they're sustainable and there's enough of it to be able to do what we need to do in the industry. And so as far as renewable fuels in general for aviation, and the military have been able to, and have a great interest in this technology and have been using it. We have a good start in this area, but there's a lot to do. We believe that establishing ourselves as leaders among business aircraft manufacturers, or what we refer to as original equipment manufacturers, is very important. So for example, what we've done at Gulfstream is the 450, for example, was the first aircraft to make a transatlantic flight on biofuel. And in doing so, saved 5.5 tons of CO2 using biofuel. We are the first OEM, or original equipment manufacturer, to fly the entire fleet of our airplanes to a major air show on biofuel, using certified base 50-50 blend of camelina biofuel and Jet A. Now, a little bit of camelina, just in case you're not familiar with it, it is a weed that grows, obviously, and it produces a seed. And when you crush that seed, it generates an oil, and that's the oil that we use in either biodiesel or biofuel. And it has such capability and such promise that we think that at some point in time it could actually reduce the CO2 footprint in general aviation by as much as 75% when you compare it to the traditional Jet A fuels that we use today. Now, I mentioned internal improvements, and some of them have to do with buildings that we build. And if you get around the airport, you're going to see buildings that are cropping up all over the place. Those are LEED certified. And when we talk about LEED certified, stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And that's based on the standards that are set by the U.S. Green Building Council. And so when we get certified, it's based on their standards. And it deals primarily with what the design of the building and also the operation of that building, and from tooling and equipment to how much energy they use and so forth. We also have a recycling program. This is something we started years ago, but we really didn't get it really going substantially until we got our employees involved. So 600 tons recycled through single stream programs, and if you look at that graphic, you see those blue bins. That means you can put all your recyclables into one bin. You don't have to go to individual recycling containers. We've diverted 1.2 million pounds of recyclables from the waste system. And now we're starting to use biodegradable containers in our cafeterias instead of styrofoam. There is so much opportunity out there, and we're learning as we go, but when we see those opportunities, we're making sure that we embrace them. And key to these initiatives is the environment of our employees and the involvement of our employees. We have green teams that generate green ideas. They do that through our employee suggestion program. And we have also a sustainability council. So as I mentioned in my opening remarks, Gulfstream has supported the Ocean Exchange since its inception. We understand that innovation can be best described as an idea successfully applied, and that's specifically what happens here. You all demonstrate that. I had an opportunity last year to sit through these solutions that were presented. It is extraordinary, the ideas that come out of this. And it's something that gives us a lot of energy and making sure that we can sustain this exchange environment. Every day, Ocean Exchange captures innovation in its truest sense. because it generates ideas to drive solutions. And all of us have deep craving to solve problems, not only within our own industries, but also in the community itself, the world community. And I think what you're going to see, for those of you who are new to this, is that these solutions that emerge have real world impact. They preserve our oceans while understanding the balance, the fine balance they maintain with commerce, allowing us to sustain the growth while at the same time protecting the environment. So in summary, Gulfstream is integrated in sustainability in its company, not only internally, but also around the world. We considered our corporate responsibility to do that. It's good for business, it's good for the environment, and Gulfstream is very proud to be part of this ocean exchange and to being a worldwide supporter of the Navigation Award. And we can't wait to see who the winner is going to be this year, and we know we're going to have a lot of competition. So with that, we have time for questions.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, if you want, you have a question here for Mr. Lombardo?
About 20 years ago, I worked on a program with GE aircraft engine and NASA, a laminar flow nacelle, houses the jet engine, with the goal of about 50% specific fuel consumption improvement. Has that gone anywhere at the Gulfstream or elsewhere?
Yeah, let me tell you that, first of all, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, first, let me bring up a couple points. First of all, our partnership with our engine manufacturers is very, very important. Laminar flow is still being looked at. It has been considered. The technology in the engine itself, although it doesn't make up 40 or 50% of the emissions goal, it is absolutely critical. And you can see in the improvements, airplane after airplane, engine type after engine type, that could not have been achieved without a partnership with the engine manufacturers. So there's a lot of technology out there. We work with them consistently, and to be able to meet these goals, we have a family of aircraft we're looking at in the future, and I can guarantee you that what you saw here is going to get markedly better as a result of the partnership we have with these engine manufacturers. So yes, to answer your question. Okay, thank you.
Please, ma'am.
Mr. Lombardo, that was an amazing presentation. I wanted to ask you a question. It piqued my curiosity when you were going through it. You kept talking about noise reduction. And besides passenger pleasure or enjoyability of a flight, what are the other reasons that you focus on noise reduction?
I think that there's the communities themselves have become more active around airports. There's a number of airports that we fly into where the community is very active in making sure that noise is no longer a major issue. I can mention Long Beach, for example. I remember when I worked at McDonnell Douglas and I worked in the Long Beach facility, noise is very important to the community because the airport's basically surrounded by homes. Same thing in Costa Mesa, Newport, the John Wayne Airport, Aspen. You can just name a bunch of them that have said in reality that noise of engines, especially on older aircraft, is just absolutely horrible. That's one big reason why we do this. So the standards that have been set up by the FAA for noise address that. There's also a safety issue. When you go into an airplane and it's really noisy, think about if you're out in your yard. I don't know how many of you mow your lawns, and just the noise of a mower. If you don't have earplugs in, you're probably making a mistake. If you're around engines, aircraft engines, you don't have noise protection. It's a safety issue. It is very much a safety issue. So the more we can reduce noise, the better off we are as individuals to be able to protect ourselves. I had an old habit when I was growing up around Douglas aircraft. I'd stand out in what we call the engine run areas, and I didn't wear ear protection. I paid a price for that, let me tell you. So I know what it's like, and I know how important it is. So the environment, the noise around the community, and noise for the personnel that work around the aircraft or sit in the airplanes is very, very important. Okay, thank you.
Ma'am, please.
What are the challenges when you're trying to introduce a biofuel and you have to have that available wherever the airplane's refilling?
That is something we really are trying to work ourselves through. I remember when algae was first being discussed as a biofuel, as a renewable fuel, by the way. And some of us would joke around, but actually we're being quite serious. We're thinking, well, where are all these algae farms going to pop up? Are we going to have algae farms in people's backyards? What's going to happen? And I'm not trying to make a joke of it, but the fact of the matter is, when you think about all the fuel that is burned today and go into aircraft, not just general aviation aircraft, but airliners, think about all the flying that goes on. How are we going to produce that? What's the mechanism for doing it? It is a very serious issue that we're going to have to deal with. We're touching on biofuel and renewable fuels that are going to make a significant difference to the carbon footprint that emanates out of general aviation aircraft. But we have to find the source. So the refining of it, the manufacturing of it, is a big challenge for us. And I'm not sure what the answer is yet. The general aviation manufacturing industry is dealing with that today and trying to figure out how best to do it, but it is going to be a major challenge. It's an infrastructure issue that we're going to have to deal with. Okay?
Great.
Be very direct about it.
One more round of applause for Joe. Thank you.